Hello and welcome to the Jackals and Tackles podcast, rugby podcast looking at the recent action from the weekend of rugby and looking ahead to future fixtures. This week we'll be discussing England's rise and their kind of completion of the Grand Slam this autumn when they beat Argentina, and then we will be discussing Ireland and South Africa, the match that had it all, or it had a lack of players. You decide. Anyway, I'll be joined by Ricky Westby. Nice to see you, Ricky. How are you?
Hello. I'm
Hello,
very
how are
good,
you?
thank you. I'm very good, thank you. Fresh off a very busy weekend of jetting about. It was Paris on Saturday, Twickenham on Sunday. Can't go wrong.
Oh, very sounds very nice. Didn't go to Dublin though, so you missed out. That's all that
Yeah, I
matters.
did. That was the one game that I really wanted to go to, but there we go.
And our other guest is Henry Osborne. Henry, how are you? How are things?
I mean, I'm very good as we'll get into it today. We're talking about England, so definitely cannot complain.
God, is that all that matters? Is England? Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how this goes. So shall I begin on England or shall I begin on actually the best match of the weekend, which was probably Ireland and South Africa? Henry, which one do you want to go for?
Let's leave best to last. So we'll go Ireland best South Africa
We'll go Ireland versus South Africa then.
then.
Okay. So Henry, start us off. What do you want to say about Ireland and South Africa?
Yeah, I mean, my one overriding thing is there is a case that that game should have been abandoned.
Right.
Someone,
Okay.
someone asked me about that.
So,
What's
well,
what?
we touched upon it being the number of cards, but if Ireland had gone down to 11 men, then the game would have had to be abandoned. And no yellow card was given when South Africa got a penalty try, which letter of the law, admittedly, Andrew Porter had just been sin binned, but letter of the law, they should have sent someone else off, should have gone down to 11, and technically the game should have ended there.
Yeah. Um,
Ooh.
I was going to say I felt they should have got a yellow for that to begin with. As the only Irish person on this podcast, I've got a lot of thoughts and feelings on the game as a whole. Um, anyway, Ricky, what do you think first before I would probably let loose?
I think that's an excellent point. I was just thinking because they had the 20-minute red card. James Ryan came on just as I think their third sin bin, so they would it
Yeah,
could have been 11. I mean, there's going to be conspiracy theorists out there that would be like, the money was talking behind that, and they weren't letting the game being abandoned. But I don't know.
I would probably say you're right. It would be, I think that would probably be too much of a talking point for the sport of rugby as a whole of kind of the abandonment. Look, don't get me wrong. It's not as if it was about player safety. It was just about penalising the same thing over and over again. And maybe because Ireland have been penalised that many times on the scrum, fairly, to be honest, that was that punishment enough? I don't know because penalty try kind of look. Ireland was never going to win that game. I said last week they were never going to win it. Um, I didn't realize just how much of an obliteration it would be. And as I heard it described earlier today, it was South Africa basically being a cat playing with a little mouse. That's how Ireland was perceived. Because they spent about 20 minutes scrummaging Ireland to death just to destroy them mentally. That's what happened. I don't think Ireland will ever recover, to be honest, in terms of their mental capacity regarding scrummaging against South Africa, if they ever come up against them. This Erasmus team. I think that's kind of done one to them. But we'll kind of come on to the kind of performance as a whole. Should South Africa have been sent to 14 men before any of Ireland's cards?
Uh, I mean, yeah, that dictated the whole game really, because I feel like Matthew Carley then changed the way he refereed the game afterwards as a result of not giving. It arguably could have been a 20-minute red. Maybe a yellow was about right.
I would agree with the assessment of yellow. I think Tommy O'Brien was already tackled and he was going down. I know it was a no arms tackle, but I feel there was a little bit of mitigation to kind of take it away from a red card. But I feel that the fact he couldn't see it was a yellow card is terrible on his part. And I also feel that for him to miss James Ryan and not give him a straight red card
Mhm.
for his clear out in the ruck is also damaging in terms of the reputation of him as a referee. He should be getting that decision they're right on the spot. Apart from that, I think everything else was right. Maybe apart from Tommy O'Brien's tackle on what do you call the winger for South Africa? He gave a penalty but didn't give a yellow. But I feel those three decisions were maybe the ones where he made mistakes. Whereas with every other decision, he was right. But yeah, so Henry, what do you think from watching everything else? How do you think South Africa performed? How do you think Ireland performed? What do you think this means for Ireland's World Cup hopes?
I think the thing that it does show is just how good, from the bits I've seen, how good Sasha Feinberg and Golo Zulu is. He's one of the best fly halves in the world. He's so young already. Like, he only made his debut, what was it, 2024? Like the levels that he's playing at is really impressive, and it's still interesting that it's still a debate on who the fly half should be for South Africa when he's playing that well.
Well, do you think the debate mainly is maybe a change of style more than anything? Like you talk about how England have different fly halves and the choice, but they all got a different style. Do you think the debate in South Africa is mainly just for how do you want to approach a game, and they could opt depending on the opposition?
I think it probably is the plan that they're going for. I think it might just be a bit more experience rather than style right now, because obviously, Handré Pollard's proven double World Cup winner. So it's probably, in a bit more of a tight game, you probably turn to him a little bit more. But I think it's definitely the idea that it can be this change of style where he can be a bit more of that sort of flair, skillful player.
Yeah, and look with the way their attacks kind of function at the minute, it's kind of the player you want. But as we saw against France, the ability to turn to that tried and tested power and might, they've got it all. Look, this South Africa team have it all. Ricky, the question is, and I don't want to kind of hear the bog standard answer of we'll see you next summer. But how do you stop South Africa and don't say England?
No, well, it would have been nice to see England play South Africa in this series, wouldn't it? Just to
Yeah,
see where they both are at this point. Uh, Maybe discipline is the one area that you target for the Springboks because everywhere else they are pretty solid. Their pack is just incredible. And then when they need to turn on the burners outside, they have the players to do that. They have a young up and coming fly half, like Henry said, who's just turning into an incredible player already. It's pretty hard to answer that question, to be honest.
well, you talk about the fly half. Let's talk about a wee bit more. I think it was Quilter Nations and their social media account. They posted out TikTok very quickly after he kicked the ball long. Sam Prendergast caught it, and Sam Prendergast did a sidestep, and he went Sam Prendergast 1-0. I was kind of like, it's not really how the scoring system works, is it? Henry, what do you think of that?
Yeah, it's been an interesting sort of way that they've gone about social media this year, hasn't it? I get they're trying to make it a bit more collective, a bit more inclusive, but there's some other clips where I was just being like, "What are you? Like, what is the point in that?" And I think what's made it worse is when you're watching the highlights back, and they'll show that there's a red card, and you're like, "Well, what's that for? Like, what's even happened there?" Yeah, it's interesting how, yeah, they're picking up these little moments, but then actually you've got to look at the whole context of the game, and sometimes in that case, it's done absolutely nothing, has it?
Well, Henry, I'll just kind of elaborate on that. Do you think we always talk about the growth of rugby? Do you think they need to kind of? I've always complained about it myself, watching Six Nations highlights or watching URC highlights, in particular URC. Like I can count so many times where the score on the highlights will say 13-7, and then it'll go 6-7 to 13-19. And it's like, right, why are these highlights not in order? Do you know what I mean? And that's happened countless times on the ERC. How do we fix this problem to grow the sport in terms of what do you want to see as a rugby fan?
I think it is the big moments. Like, I understand that when there's sort of a high scoring game, a highlight clip might be cut to like 5 minutes. So you've got to get those moments in. That's all you can get in. But you kind of just need to have a bit of a flow to the game. Like, even if it's things like maybe a penalty gets missed, if it's a big moment that sort of tells the context of the game, that needs to be in there, surely.
Yeah, and Ricky, what do you think?
I mean, if you're hiring people that aren't processing highlights as a linear flow, then it's utterly ridiculous, isn't it? People are watching the highlights because they've missed a game, and they're trying to catch up on what happened. Uh, that's what actually annoys me quite a lot. Is often it's similar with actually a lot of sports, like with the NFL. It's ridiculous. They don't explain how they got down the field. Suddenly, it's just like it's obviously red zone, kind of the attraction of that, but the actual real rugby fan wants to understand what happened, how they got there, where the points came from, and I don't mean to be rude, but that's just ineptitude, really.
Well, I'll say that. I'll just build on your comment there about the real kind of NFL fan or the real rugby fan. I don't really know many people who would be kind of passive, who will be going and searching out the highlights, if you get me. Like those are the fans you have to probably attract that kind of highlight reel to, is those who want to go and search it out. Like it might come up on a platform, but those who want to see it are the actual fans. Do you think you need to obviously accommodate them more than the general viewer?
Well, it's with social media posts, then you obviously have, like we were talking about with the Sam Prendergast thing, that's obviously a very reactionary thing to get someone to go, oh, what happened here? Uh, and that's fine with social media clips if you're just posting, I don't know, BLBRE's try on Saturday night with ridiculous little kick over the top and then running. That's perfect for what you want to engage an audience, but people with the highlights, they want to see progression.
Hmm.
And it's also, as you said, it is the real rugby fan that's seeking out what happened in the game and they're going to look for the highlights. So I think you're bang on there.
So, Henry, I'll ask you one last question. How much hope do you give Ireland in the Six Nations?
I know you're quite down on it, but I do think they could spring a surprise. I think like they sort of are showing some like you say that it's it was a big blowout. Like Ireland never really looked in it. It was an 11 point game. Like even at half time, it was sort of what was it like 1 point or so. It was a very close game on the scoreboard. So if Ireland can play sort of unattractive rugby but bring other teams sort of down, what's to say they can't get those wins? It's only 5 wins to get a Grand Slam, only 4 wins realistically to win the tournament. I think it's possible.
So, play like England did for the last, what, 6 years?
Well, it's worked.
Well, it hasn't, you haven't won many Six Nations. But I'll continue there. Is I personally think that this season they should look to building a squad because they have to travel away to England and they have to travel away to France. Two very tough away fixtures. I feel like he's not brought in new players. I was reading a piece by O'Gara, and O'Gara basically asked the question, what did we learn from the Ireland performance? We already know that their squad is a good squad of players. Maybe we bit past it, but they are all good players. What new players have we seen come through to actually put their hand up and be like, look, I deserve a place for this next World Cup, or I deserve a place to be pushing you? Have we actually seen any difference in that Ireland squad, Ricky?
I will harp on about this until Kingdom Come, but we still don't have a out and out 10 that you think, oh, is Ireland's number 10. I think that's where truly stems. And then, of course, as you say, we didn't see young blood being pushed through at all, really, over this series.
Well, Andy Farrell believes it's Sam Prendergast. Let's just be honest. He does believe he is the 10. Otherwise, he wouldn't have put Crowley on the bench. And also, there was a case being made, I believe, by Ian Madigan that he believes number 10 should be Harry Byrne.
Cool.
So that is who he believes should be number 10, as I read reports. But anyway, we'll leave Ireland. I've had enough of depression for a bit. Um, let's move on to further depression with England and Argentina. Where do you want to begin? Do you want to begin with the horrible assault of Felipe Contepomi by Tom Curry, apparently? Or do you want to begin on your win? Henry, kick us off.
But, I mean, let's leave the juicy bit till the end. I think what's quite promising that we did really see is sort of inside centre has been a big problem point for England for like the last 20 years. But now we've got three that are genuine international quality. Like it's easy to get that Charlie Atkinson came through and really showed what he can do. Fraser Dingwall's been class throughout the Autumn Nation series, and now Max Ajomo has come in, but in a man of the match performance in his first game at Twickenham, sort of scoring a try, setting up Emmanuel Failbos with that absolutely brilliant crossfield kick. I think England just sort of need to pick one now and stay with it going forwards for the Six Nations, which I probably think will be Fraser Dingwall. But it's promising, particularly if you only look at the first half. The second half, less so.
So how we're judging rugby these days, first half, and that's it.
If only.
So Ricky, just to add on that then, do you not see some worrying signs from the second half performance? Particularly
Yeah.
your decision making in that last phase of play that allowed them to come into the 22. Ultimately, obviously, he got away with it because he messed up the line out. But are you a bit worried as well that not everything is fully there?
I mean, it doesn't necessarily need to be completely there. I think if you saw at the start of the second half, that's where I think there was a ridiculous stat where in the opening 10 minutes of the half, the possession was 98% to 2%.
Yeah.
And obviously also there was, I think, around five penalties in a row conceded by England. That is not the start that you can have to half and expect to win the Six Nations. So if you can somehow manage to turn that around to keep the penalties to a minimum, then maybe there's a very good cause of optimism to say we can win the Six Nations. But and as we saw at the end as well, they were just the skies just apart towards the end. I was surprised they didn't take the quick tap and go for it. But
Well, they might have just believed that they had the momentum. That might have been the only thing at that time. Anyway, we'll move on to the question, Ricky, of is George Ford just living life at the minute to his fullest, or what's the story with him? Like he seemed to have a good game in the first half, but there were other moments when they was charged down in the first half as well, I believe, for a 5 meter
yes,
scrum.
mhm.
How do you think he's doing? Do you think he is the answer for England, or do you think right he's a stopgap before you move on to your next playmaker for the foreseeable future?
That is the thing, isn't it? He's 32 years old. The World Cup, he will be. I don't I'm not to say this
30,
accurately, but
35.
30, it might be 35. Yeah. Um, he's still playing at a very high level at club level, and he's still doing what he does best on the field. But as you said, he has been going a little bit absent on the field. Uh, we would have seen more of Finn Smith if we thought it was going to move forward with that into the Six Nations. I thought so. I think maybe he will stick with George Ford for the next year at the very least.
Okay. And Henry, look, I'll ask you just plain and simple. What do you think about the Contaponi comments? What do you think?
Yeah, it's quite funny, isn't it? Like it's really like I know Steve Borthwick sort of said, I don't want to make this a talking point from what was a great game, but I mean, it was it was a laugh, wasn't it? Yeah, obviously, it's come out now that the player's now done his ACL and the tackle wasn't great, and I do think it was dealt with correctly on the pitch. I think it was just a penalty. Sort of Curry tried to back out, probably didn't fully commit to the tackle, but sort of the injury only came from the way he was already in the air from the kick. I think Contepomi's more frustrated than anything, given what you're saying that a couple of weeks ago they had a decision that was sort of done on the outcome rather than what was there, and he doesn't see there being sort of the equivalent happening in this one, where it's sort of actually how probably should be how World Rugby want it ref, with it being the actions being refereed rather than anything. I mean, they nearly won the game because of it, so I don't think they can complain about the actual situation on the pitch. But then, obviously, it spilling out afterwards was ugly, but it was at least as a fan, it was enjoyable to watch. And then, seeing all the players sprint down the tunnel and hearing everything afterwards, it's just a good laugh, isn't it?
Well, my question, I would agree with you in terms of I thought it was just penalty. It was a late tackle, and a late tackle is a late tackle. But Ricky, I'll ask because I saw on social media Stuart Barnes calling out a particular journalist regarding it being his, and in quotes, a little late. Is there much difference between it being a late tackle and a little late, or what do you think?
Was that what's his name? Was it Will Kelleher? Was that
Will
who?
Kelleher. Didn't
Yeah,
want to mention his name, but yeah,
I mean, yeah, that there's late and then it's just late. It
yeah.
was a penalty, but then I personally think he's making more of a meal of it because they didn't win. I'm talking, sorry, Contempone, not Stuart
Not
Parks.
Ke- not Kelleher, no.
No, no. Um, I think he's making more of a meal of it because they have lost 3 games in a row to England over the summer and now the autumn. And they could have easily won yesterday. A lot of frustration building up.
Yeah, I understand that. And look, I think personally, as my view is England look to be growing, but so do the Argentinians. It's very encouraging when it comes to the World Cup, to be honest, that you've got teams that are willing to be able to give each other a good battle at the highest level. Now, as you say, we just need to see England play South Africa and you just get absolutely embarrassed. That'd be fun. So, shall I move on to the next big talking point, which is the All Blacks and Wales? Ricky, where do you want to begin on this match? Is there much to begin on this match, or what do you think?
Um, I think we've talked over the past few weeks about signs of positivity for Wales, and I've been probably overly harsh towards them. I think I'd like to say that was a real sign of positivity in the grand scheme of things. They did show some heart, and they looked like they were actually bang up for it, which is a lot more than you can say at the end of the Six Nations.
Henry, would you say conceding 52 points is positive? Positive?
I think scoring 26 points against New Zealand is a positive. I think they're probably looking a bit more at their attack rather than sort of defense can come later. But yes, 52 points at home, not a great sign. But then, you look at Wales's record against New Zealand historically, a 52-26 loss isn't really standing out as like a big loss compared to anything else that they've had before. So yeah, it's quite as Ricky said, quite a promising sign. Tom Rogers getting a hat trick. How many players can say they scored a hat trick against New Zealand, let alone when Wales are at the lowest they've ever been? And then I think it was also the most tries Wales have ever scored against New Zealand in Cardiff. Like they're playing with a real sense of identity, which is quite promising to see. Even though they're not the finished product, they are quite a long way off that. But you can really see the progression that is being made slowly as it is.
Well, obviously, building on Ricky's comments about the positivity and then just yours talking about the style, what do you believe that style for Wales is in terms of what way they want to approach the game coming forward now?
I suppose it's probably they're looking at attack, and I know Eddie Jones was always a big proponent of the idea of World Rugby going in sort of cycles of attack and defence. We're probably in sort of a bit more of an attacking one at the moment, so it probably is sort of prioritising that at the moment. So I think it is kind of just getting players coherently and sort of being on the same wavelength. We'll see what happens this weekend against South Africa, but I think it is kind of just making sure you're on the same page, kind of just playing simple rugby, but playing that simple rugby well.
Well, Ricky, talking about that of the game coming up this weekend, is there much point in this game this weekend? Like, they're missing 13 players. We were talking earlier about the lack of tickets sold. What's your view?
Well, it's outside the international test window, isn't it? I'm not sure what the goal of it is. Wales aren't in. How many players for South Africa missing as well? Because I've read they were going to miss a few.
They're missing quite a few, particularly the ones that are involved in France.
Yeah,
Um, but obviously they've got the largest pool around the world to pick from, so they could just
mm.
hand out caps for the crack. So they're missing quite a few of their star players too.
Yeah. So as as like, what is the point? Genuinely, it's going to be a bit. Maybe it's for a bit of money. Who knows? But
Yeah, but the question is, how can you make that money when you're not able to sell the tickets? So you're not able to sell an atmosphere. You're not able to sell that experience to. It will impact them probably going forward of TV revenue and sponsorship. So how, what as I say, what is the point?
true, the operational costs are probably going to outweigh whatever they sell in tickets anyway. So, maybe another misguided call from the WRU.
Well, this is the thing. They are spending money. They seem to be wanting to try and put wheels on show, but it all seems to be damaging. Like, how do they fix this mess, Henry? That like they keep putting themselves in.
Yeah, I do wonder whether it is the right idea but executed wrongly because it has become quite standard practice, particularly for Wales, to do these sort of outside the test window games. Like, I mean, England did it, which is quite rare against Australia at the start of the autumn, which I think probably would have been a better slot for Wales to go into and sort of play it right at the start, and then they could build from that. Whereas I think sort of having it at the end kind of undermines what you've built because you get a blowout against South Africa, you play awfully. That could be a real confidence knock in a lot of ways. I also wonder whether it'd be a game better suited to sort of lower ranked nation. I appreciate that, they play Fiji have done these sort of out of test window games. They did it last year in Scotland, and it was basically just Scotland versus the Fijian drawer. So I think it could be done like that, sort of play at lower team, get a bit more of a contest. But I just think playing South Africa of all teams at the end of a long window is such a misguided step.
Well, I would also point to their clubs. Like we talk about how their clubs are in trouble. Only Cardiff are performing all right in the URC. The other three are sitting right at the bottom of that division. And what they're doing is they have to give back all the players who play abroad outside Wales, and they have to take the players from those clubs that are struggling to represent them, which means in this URC round, they are likely to lose all those games because the best players of those teams will be missing. So again, there's more revenue they'll be losing because they can't get the league sorted because they can't climb the league. Ricky, like, what is the madness? Like, where are they going with this?
Well, it's a recurrent theme, isn't it? Things aren't. They're obviously trying to make things better without looking at the bigger picture.
Yeah,
Uh, the finer details are being missed, as you said. That you got three teams just sitting bang at the bottom. It's just not a good look, is it? Really, overall, and they're trying to rebrand that image of we actually know what we're doing, and they're just shooting themselves in the foot.
yeah, 100%. And it's really worrying because we still don't know what their decision will be regarding their future, to be completely honest. Which club will they go? And we don't know any of that. And we don't even know if they might U-turn and save all four clubs and financially find themselves another way. Anyway, shall we move on to France v Australia and talk about that briefly? You've already mentioned about the brilliant kind of try from Louis Bierre, but what else stood out in that game for you, Ricky?
French vulnerability, actually. They got
Okay, explain.
they got cut open quite a few times by the Aussie pack, and that was interesting to me. Like, as
Why?
in support runners coming through. Well, they've let's be real, the Aussies haven't been great in this test window, and I personally thought it wouldn't be much of a game. Thankfully, the Aussies came out and gave the French a really good test, but there's some clear concern in their defence, I think.
And building on that, Henry, what do you think in terms of where does that leave France moving forward? Because they lost the first game to South Africa, which was the big one, and it was the first time. Was it the first time ever they lost four games in a row because they lost the three to New Zealand? In terms of kind of test matches, like they did beat Fiji, but they were not great against Fiji either. They did beat Australia. Where are they kind of sitting now? They were viewed as probably the best team in Europe coming into this, but where are they?
I think, yeah, it's very strange because they are almost such a lopsided team. Like their attack is probably still the best in the world, I'd say. Like we saw it on Saturday with what was it, 48 points they put on against Australia. But at the same time, their defense is so concerning. It's just sort of letting players slip past tackles, just sort of letting Australia get around them, which is very unlike them recently. So I think that's definitely the big work on they probably need because otherwise teams will just expose them in defence, I think.
Is the Welsh coach still their forwards coach or defense coach still?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, uh, we were laughing
Sean
on
Edwards.
Saturday, but yeah,
So what were you saying? You're laughing on Saturday because I don't want to say it. He's
uh,
been lauded so much in terms of the work he's done, but obviously it seems a weakness. But what were you going to say?
oh well, this might be a bit rude, but they were saying the
Keep
only
it
reason
keep
he's
it keep it
there
within
is
reason.
the only reason he's there is to so that Fabien Gaultier doesn't have to speak English, is what someone told me. But no, no, he's a very good coach. But as we said, there is concern, isn't there?
Yeah, yeah. And look. Before we move on to the next topic, which we'll be kind of looking at the kind of smaller nations regarding the international window, um, and that does include Scotland. Um, what do we make of Australia and their year? It's been a very, very long year for them. They've lost a significant amount of games. They had one high of beating the British and Irish Lions. They had another high of beating Argentina and a third high of beating South Africa. But where do they actually stand, Henry?
I think it's quite strange they've almost reset themselves in some ways, at least mentally. Like they're sort of now, it looks like they're trying to fit that 4 year World Cup window into like a year and a half, realistically, after the Lions tour. I think they've definitely got some players coming through that are absolutely world class. Like Max Jorgensen sort of showed on the weekend. Joseph Swiley is really becoming a proper international player. Even like Tom Hooper, when he is on the pitch, he's really like showing that he can be that sort of bedrock of the pack. But I think probably just exhausted playing too much international rugby at the moment as well. That yeah, they just need a bit of clarity on where they're going. I think first and foremost, because so much was built towards the Lions series that now it's kind of just that weird hangover afterwards. So yeah, I think the next sort of year or so will really determine where they actually are, whether they can compete at a home World Cup, which I think they probably can if they can sort themselves out.
The Georgia v Japan game had a significant impact on the world rankings and how that would impact the World Cup draw coming up. Did you see any of it, Henry? Any of the highlights of Georgia v Japan and the
I
kind of
didn't
amazing finish to the match?
So I didn't get a chance to watch it because I was out having a few bevs. But I mean, we were talking it up, weren't we? Saying that it could have quite a big consequence last week, and boy, has it.
Do you want to explain the Do you want to explain the impact to those who are listening?
But essentially, because Japan have beaten Georgia, spoiler alert, it means that they have now gone into band two for the World Cup draw in December, which means that they'll be alongside Wales, essentially rendering their game a bit pointless. But it means that now Georgia have dropped down into that third band below Wales and Japan. So Georgia are now ranked 13th in the world, and Japan and Wales are 11th and 12th.
Do you think, Ricky, that Georgia have played this pretty poorly because of just playing smaller nations has come against them in their build up to this massive game against Japan?
That's possible because we can often it's meeting the quality that is put out in front of you. And then if you then come up against a good team, well, like Japan, then you find you've met your match and probably more, and which they did find out. Fine margins though,
Exactly.
very fine margins. Only 2 points is incredible.
Oh, it is. And as I say, did you get to see the end of the highlights and the finish?
I did not know I was somewhere in somewhere Paris probably.
No, fair enough. It was incredible in terms of the finish that Japan kind of had. They pulled it out of the bag in the end after Georgia fought back miraculously to get themselves within a winning kind of stage of the match with just minutes left. So Eddie Jones is doing a fine job there. So he does. And I think his comments came out recently about the fatigue element of rugby. Have we lost that? Like, Ricky, have we lost the fatigue element with the amount of TMO, the amount of stoppages, the amount of breaks in play? Do we need to get players being tired again and having play flow?
The only team that would really benefit is those who have an incredibly strong bench. So that'll be Springboks and England of what I can think about at the moment.
Not France?
Uh, well, yeah, of course, France as well. But obviously, we've seen the new dubbed POM squad. It's fun to see that being rolled out. Yeah, I mean, it is taking far too long for decisions to be checked, personally, and that obviously gives the pack a breather and everything, and then changes the way the game flows.
Well, can we build on that, Henry? Like, I think did the Ireland match take about 4 hours to complete on Saturday when it's supposed to be an 80-minute match? No, I think it was genuinely about 2 hours or something like that. Um, What do you think, Henry? Is it spoiling the product? Do TMOs have too much of a say?
I don't know if TMOs have too much of a say because, I mean, ultimately we'd complain if they got it wrong and we'd complain if things were missed. So it's an important thing for them to be able to look at everything. I do like the idea that it should only be foul play or something in scoring, which I think is kind of what it is now anyway. But maybe we could have sort of the way that Sevens does it and sort of just, one look, so you don't need to see every single angle. But I think people would complain anyway. It's kind of better to get things right
Mm.
than to kind of get things wrong for the sake of just getting it sped up.
There have been incidents, and I think they've worked well at times, where play continues and the TMO continues to look at the incident and then brings it back. Why aren't we getting that kind of approach still today instead of stopping everything and being like, right, you need to look at this along with what I'm looking at? Is there not a team of TMOs? They could not have more than one TMO discussing this in the background, Ricky?
To be honest, it does happen more often than you think. Uh,
Yeah,
because I've had the TMO in my ear for the last 3 weeks, and you genuinely hear them like checking a lot in the background to see if it's like foul play and stuff like that, and they are going over it. But I think, and that's with the, pardon me, the introduction of the bunker system as well. That has definitely benefited the game, and in terms of we're not stopping to look at see if it's dangerous on every single decision. So there's
yeah.
some benefits and drawbacks. As Henry said, you're never going to win this argument. There's always going to be something that's wrong.
Look, the way I look at life, there's no one in any argument, lad. Everyone's got a different opinion. That's the way life is, just opinions.
Exactly.
Anyway, there wasn't too much to talk about in this game, apart from the fact that Henry and I discussed this last week of Scotland and Tonga. What was the point? Why are Scotland continuously playing lower ranked sides that's not developing them? Again, it was they kept Tonga scoreless. Henry, do you think this game was ended? Should Scotland maybe have just let it kind of go, played a bigger opposition? What should have happened?
Yeah, it was like I feel like this is sort of the sort of game that Scotland should have played as their sort of, hangover game once everyone's gone back to their clubs. It's it's really difficult to know anything new about Scotland from the game. I think that's the biggest problem is like where have they progressed? Like 56 nil, okay, they look good in attack, but they weren't challenged. It was sort of just might as well have been like the Harlem Globetrotters playing in a lot of ways because what are you actually proving? Like what is being gained from playing? And I do think it's great that we're playing these tier two nations and helping to bring them up. But realistically, what is it to a tier one nation to only play against teams below you?
Well, Ricky, building on that in terms of bringing up the tier two nations, I was listening to the commentary of the match when I had it on, and they talked about how Tonga, and they talked to the coach of Tonga on the TV at the time, and they were like, "So you've all come together this week from all different parts of the globe." Basically, they were given a few days to train and come together, where Scotland been together for what, over a month. What benefit is that to Tonga? They've all came. They're, as Henry pointed out, kind of Harlem Globetrotters to an extent. What is the benefit for either side?
Does feel a bit insulting to the Pacific nations, isn't it? Dragging them
So
out.
my point isn't about the quality of the players. It's more about you're bringing them together for less than a week, not giving them enough preparation to be able to prepare themselves for a tier one nation. That's
Oh
where
yeah,
I'm coming from.
that's what I mean. It's a bit insulting
Oh, sorry.
to the players, if anything, and to the coaching setup that they have to pull something out of the bag at such like in such a short turnaround. Um, Obviously, the rugby in the Pacific nations has taken a massive hit as it is, and that's not going to benefit them at all with dwindling funds. And for Scotland, that's just like a training exercise that, as Henry said, I'm jumping on the back of Henry again. There's no real benefit, and we don't know where if they're going to be any better come February, and whether they have any shot at the Six Nations. I'm going to say off this no, but
Well, again, just going on what you said about the Pacific nations, Henrik, Tonga didn't play another game during this international window. So they didn't. At least Samoa were trying to qualify for World Cup. Fiji had their fixtures. Like, what is the state of the Pacific nations? Are they getting left behind? They used to be the most exciting and brilliant nations to watch. And don't get me wrong, Fiji are still thereabouts because they are now in this nations championship. But is everyone else getting left behind?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it with the Nation Championship, as you just touched on, saying like Fiji are in this nation, but they're not going to be playing any home games. All their games are going to be at a neutral venue. So it's very much they're kind of the afterthought in a lot of ways of international rugby. I think, I mean, we touched on how last week, how Samoa have really sort of fallen from being the best out of the three Pacific Nations teams to now being kind of really, really struggling and being properly in the doldrums. I think Tonga's always sort of been they've always been like the second or third team. They've not really had their moment to shine. And it's quite disappointing to see that they're then not being given sort of any steps to succeed. And we've seen like Fiji has been fantastic for building Fiji into realistically a tier one nation. And I'm like Moana Pacifica's doing good things and they're sort of helping sort of create a pathway for those other Pacifica teams. But I think that there does need to be sort of another step between to kind of bring those teams together, whether that's sort of a internal Oceania Championship, sort of like get a few clubs going there that are then playing as like franchises in their own sort of mini Super Rugby thing, or get Moana Pacifica playing in Tonga and Samoa more, or where maybe they can have their own teams rather than it being actually run by New Zealand. I think that's probably what needs to be done because at the moment they're just sort of sitting behind and kind of just having to watch the world go by otherwise.
Well, no, I know I made the comment about Scotland in terms of not really testing themselves, but to be fair to Scotland, they did tour the Pacific nations in the summer, bring in a tier one nation down there. I was interviewing Donica Ryan, I was interviewing Alton Delan, and we were talking about the Ireland in America to try and grow the sport there. And it did come up in terms of why don't bigger nations go to the Pacific Islands? Imagine being able to have that in your CV in your career of you've went there, you've played in those countries. Why wouldn't you want to go? Like we were talking to Delan about Russia. Like he went to Russia and said it was the best experience of his life with Connacht.
And they're all wrapped
As a
up in all the
player,
blankets and everything.
exactly. As a player, would you not want to go to random areas of the world and test yourself, Ricky?
Yeah, well, I mean, absolutely. I was just thinking about how Pacific nations are actually in big trouble when it comes to rugby union because the NRL and the National Rugby League and the Australian government have invested, I think, nearly 200 million into growing rugby league across the Pacific nations. Now, if you looked at the Pacific Championships as well, which is the rugby league's international window for those countries, the support there was formidable. There was Tonga, Samoa, the Cook Islands, lots of good teams playing. And then you just think, where does rugby, if rugby union continues to treat them as an afterthought, it's gonna die out there.
Well, you can use the case study of Australia. Like I was listening to Australian journalists talking about how technically both league and union have the same footing when it comes through the school systems, when it comes through all this. But the difference is rugby league is scouting the players a lot younger because they get the money to go and scout them and bring them into the league and bring them professional players before union even has a chance to get their hands on them. What you've just kind of put there is that's going to happen now in the Pacific Islands as well, where league is just going to get their hands on them and make them stars and give them the world, which is fair. That's what you want as an individual, and that's what you want as a player. But from what Ricky said, do we now think maybe Henry Union need to act within the next year?
I think definitely. I think the problem is that there's been sort of issues with alleged corruption in throughout the Pacific Islands, and it's not been a stable place for a governing body to be. And there have been efforts. There have been sort of like combines and everything. That there have been efforts to grow the game there, but you've got to either fully integrate them or not. You can't just sort of have them sitting on the sidelines waiting for when it's relevant and waiting for when it's a good time for you to bring them over. And I think like the whole thing of players can switch allegiances. We saw it with Tamani at the weekend as well, becoming the oldest debutant for any like World Cup nation at 39, which is great to see. And maybe there's an argument that Manu Tuilagi can go for Samoa for the next World Cup. That I'd love to see that. That'd be a really good international send off for him. And I think that's something that can be really good. But you kind of need to actually make that a thing that they can do, because it's all well and good having these players come in and sort of go, okay, I'm going to be an international rugby player for this smaller nation. But if they're not being given a chance to develop with those teams and sort of play for them before the World Cup, and if they're just sort of having to come in at the last minute and just kind of step into the shoes, you're not going to actually create any progress. You need to create the platform, create the regular games, which maybe the Nations Championship will do with the second tier. But I'm worried that actually shutting them out further is only going to make that worse.
Well, you talk about a lot of different things there, but obviously their players have been poached by the likes of Australia and New Zealand as well. They're better players. Like it's left their national teams. Don't get me wrong, they qualify for every World Cup nearly, and they usually put on a show. But how far could they have went? How much more could they have done had they had their best players, Ricky?
Well, exactly. I mean, England and Ireland and all the big, sorry, I just have to say, but all the big nations are poaching the best talent from teams, countries like the Pacific Islands. And how are they meant to grow? Like they're going to be inspired by big central focal figures on the island that play for their country. If we're just
Yeah.
poaching them, how is anything meant to like? How are you meant to inspire? It, it's tough to grow based on that.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And look, it is something that we've all I would say growing up myself, sounds like you are the same. You loved when your country was playing a Pacific nation because you didn't know what you're in for. You're in for a bit of excitement at a bare minimum. Be that from high score game, be that from a bit of excellence. There would always be something. Do you know what I mean? Anyway, so I move on to a new worrying trend that might be starting. Hopefully not for the long term, and hopefully it gets shot down very quickly. But Henry, I would say, city rivals potentially in terms of the London Irish. They've done something miraculous, haven't they?
Yeah, they've released a post on Instagram today of their new kit. Bear in mind, they're not playing they've got no players. They're not playing in a league, but they've released a new kit, which is, I understand, to basically help create funds for the team, particularly for the amateur team, and sort of give back to the club during what's been a very difficult time for them. But the big sticking point is instead of any of the players, because they have none, because not even any models, they've used AI. And even when you look at this video, the kit's even been put on an AI. You see sort of the badge wobbling about slightly. It just looks, it's so uncanny valley. It's so just off. It's quite sort of, I mean, there's been in the comments, there's been sort of people that have worked with the club in that past, basically turning around and saying, like, this is very disappointing that if this is the way that you are looking to present the club, when we've seen how good Worcester have been, even on social media, how good Worcester have been since they've come back and actually creating a real community with, or recreating that community with the club. So if that's the way that you're going to present the club when it's trying to come back, what does that actually mean for the future?
Well, building on what you've just said about the community, Ricky, like you're a rugby fan, you've got the teams that we support, we've got local everything. If they're starting on this kind of footing where they're already annoying their fans, former staff, other kind of opponents, will they actually succeed or not? Like they might say they want to come back, but if they're really not getting any backing because they're losing all the goodwill, as Henry pointed out, as Worcester, look, Worcester went under because of bad ownership and all this, but they've come back and there was a lot of excitement around who they're going to get, what kind of their kind of social media output as well of here's our player, can you guess who he is? Have they kind of shot themselves in the foot with this, Ricky?
Feel like they've gone in with the attitude of there's no such thing as bad publicity, and they're trying to garner whatever they can. But then, as you said, they are shooting themselves in the foot. You don't want to, if old members of staff are commenting and saying this is not the ways to do things. That speaks volumes about how wrong they're going about it.
Well, look, whenever I was younger, I'll be honest, I didn't have really any kind of skin in the game or interest in the Premiership. But if I did look across, it's like, oh, London Irish, they're a team because Irish connection. But the thing is if you kind of delve in deeper, as we've said, like you say no bad publicity, you kind of need good publicity as well, though, otherwise it's not going to last long.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think they've gone in with the absolute wrong attitude that um, branding people can often say that, as I said, that there is no such thing as bad publicity. But in this kind of scenario where rugby is a game where you need a core fan base and the traditional values, and you don't get them back on board or keep them on board by doing things like a shoddy AI production like
Exactly. That's why we don't do it ourselves because we are professional and well put together.
that.
Anyway, shall I move on to the Premiership return this weekend? Now, we might be missing a few stars potentially because of recovery, because of the need of getting their bodies together after international action. But that's not to say it won't be entertaining or interesting. So I'll begin with a team that could have ended up in London Irish's position had he not been soullessly bought over by an energy drink company that I won't name, as they host the Tigers. Henry, what do you think? How do you think that's going to go?
Yeah, I can't see Newcastle getting the win just yet. I think they are building something quite promising. It's quite nice to see how they've been targeting the Prem Cup in particular to kind of build that foundation and say like, look, we want to actually have something tangible. We know we're not going to compete just yet, but I think it will be a Leicester win. But it's promising signs, and I think Newcastle will show what having actually a full squad together during this international window has been, how productive that's been for them.
Well, Ricky, building on that, like Bristol under Pat Lam, they went and targeted the Prem Cup to help build them when they were first coming up towards the Premiership. Do you agree that that's the right way to go for Newcastle at this minute in time? Just build and try and get confidence before taking on the Premiership?
Absolutely. If we can learn anything from Wales, is that confidence is a massive factor in actually producing anything on the field. And they've had their confidence bludgeoned, and it's similar to Newcastle. If they target the cup where they can get wins, it'll do them a world of good. Um, I'm not a big fan of the Prem Cup this year because they kicked out the Championship teams, but it will be good for them to build, and hopefully they can sustain the challenge.
Well, that's on Friday night, so we're all saying Leicester win, are we?
I think so.
Yeah.
Okay. Moving on to Seal Sharks and Exeter. I don't want to kind of be ringing the sirens too early, but I feel like this is a must win for Seal regarding their ambitions for the season. It's what, 5 games in? They've won two, lost three, and this is a home game against a team that's currently fighting near the top of the table. Do they need to win it there, Ricky?
Ah, it's a bit early to say that it's a must win, but
They
they
aren't good
are.
on they aren't good on the road. They need to win their home games.
Yeah, you make a very good point actually, and that 5 points outside the top four. I still think it's too early to say it's a must win, but it would be very handy if they did win, obviously.
Can you see them winning, or do you think that Exeter will have too much?
I'm going to opt with Exeter, I think.
Okay, fair enough. And Henry, do you want to chime in for us, please?
Yeah, there's a few teams that are sort of in that weird position where it's a must win, but it's not quite a must win. It's too early for that. I think it is too early for that, especially with them not having their internationals back just yet. They won't have George Ford, they won't have Tom Curry, they won't have sort of some of the big stars that really will give a bit of momentum sort of later down the line. But I think Sale might edge it just because of the home advantage. I think sort of the autumn's probably been a bit disruptive for all the teams. It's a bit of a fresh start. I think Sale just about, but I think it'd be a good contest.
Okay, fair enough. Having obviously worked closely with Sale, I hope that they win, and I can only see them winning at home. I just don't trust them away from home, so I personally do think it's a must win for them. Do you want to stick on must wins? And Gloucester need to win a game, don't they, Henry? It's just a shame that
And
a team stand in the way of them.
yeah, it's if anyone's a must win that's going to sort of say the trajectory of the season, I think this is the game because Quins are in just of an awkward place as Gloucester. I think them and Sale are the three teams that are in quite an awkward position where anything could happen from here. Like I'm gonna, it's tough for me to say, but I am gonna edge Gloucester again on the home advantage. We saw what they did against Quins last year at home, nilling them, which was an awful game to watch, at least from
Mm.
a Quins perspective. But yeah, I think Gloucester have got some really good, sort of almost international level talent with the likes of Will Joseph, sort of coming in and proving themselves this season. Whereas I think Quins have kind of been ravaged by injuries early on, and it's just not clicked to them. It's been very disruptive. And maybe, they've had a bit of time together during this Prem Cup period, during this international period, to kind of rebuild and regroup. But I think Gloucester will have it.
And Ricky, do you want to add on? Like, I'll say that I feel that Gloucester's position's a bit of a false position. I feel they've played very well in quite a few games, and they've not got themselves over the line. I can see this being a pretty dominant win for Gloucester, being honest. What do you think, Ricky?
Hmm. I think I'm I don't know why I want to go with Quins. I just have a feeling. I mean, if you look at defensively, Gloucester haven't been all there. Um, I just have a feeling that they might nick something on Saturday. Quins
Okay, fair
away
enough.
on the road, turn around their stale form, I think is the best way to say it.
And we'll move on to maybe the more exciting games coming up over this weekend, which is Bristol's at home to table toppers Northampton. What do you think, Ricky? How do you think that will go?
Uh, with the international window just closing, I'm going to say Bristol, just because Northampton, the core of their squad is in that England team, isn't it? I think Bristol will take this one, home advantage as well.
But Bristol are missing some of their Fijians. Don't you forget they're internationals too, man.
No Pacific bias. No.
Henry, what do you think?
Yeah, I've definitely got. I've got a side with Ricky there. I think Northampton have been the form team this season, but we've seen what's happened to them in the past where they've not had those international players. It's crumbled a little bit. Their entire backline basically won't be there. And Callum Chick's been a revelation for them at number 8 this year, but I think Bristol will just they'll just edge it. I think.
Yeah, I would agree with both of these, to be honest. All kind of comments aside. And finally, Saracens be back. How do you think that will go, Henry?
I mean, it's really hard for me not to sort of put a bit of bias in here, but I think Bath will be really trying to make a statement with this. It's two teams that are really fighting for top four, and they are really like two of the form teams. I think Bath will do it. I think it'd be another great contest, but I think yeah, Bath. So we've got 10
And
minutes.
Ricky? And Ricky?
I am going to go with Bath as well, purely because I don't like Saracens.
No one likes Saracens, man. That's not a fair argument.
True. I mean, Bath are fairly insufferable as well.
Yeah, but
So,
they didn't break the financial rules the way that Saracens did they?
I mean, you look at their squad now, it's ridiculous though, isn't
It is ridiculous, but they've not been proved of anything, so I'm not going to say anything as of yet. So
it? That's not libelous,
anyway,
us.
it's that's why I'm holding us back. It's okay. Anyway, we'll move on to the ERC to an extent. I've put out four games which might be worth talking about. Like Dragons are playing Leinster, and we talked about the struggles of Wales. So I don't really think that's a contest, and I don't think there's a few contests worth speaking about.
Yeah, and I mean
But
Leinster have
I've
been
kept
pretty rubbish this year.
lad, to be fair, I'm not a Leinster fan, so it doesn't bother me. I am very happy. But knowing how massive their squad is, and I don't want to say it, the Dragons aren't any great shakes. I think they've got it in the bag this weekend. I can see them getting a win. Um,
think they'll
Look,
be all right.
I'll move on to the biggest game, which would be Munster versus the Stormers, the two top table teams at the top of the table. I think because of the lack again of international players, Munster might edge this. With the Stormers players obviously making that travel to the south of Ireland. What do you think, Henry?
I do think that, as you just said, that travel is going to be a real big factor for the Stormers. Obviously, they won't have all their South Africa players either, so that probably would have made the journey a little bit nicer. But yeah, I think home advantage is going to be quite crucial here in this top of the table clash.
And Ricky?
Yeah, I've got nothing else to add on that. I'd agree. Just the distance is a massive factor, isn't it?
Perfect. Next up, I was going to go for Zebra and Cardiff. Now, the reason I've chosen this one is because Cardiff are the only team that are kind of performing from Wales in the URC this season. Zebra are currently above Benetton, which normally doesn't happen. Um, but Cardiff are in the top four and they're fighting at the top of the table. I don't want to say it's a must win, but it kind of feels like a must win to keep the kind of Welsh momentum going in terms of just keeping that confidence and keeping that flow going for the nation after a mixed international window. Would you say, Henry?
Yeah, I think the thing that's going to really shoot Cardiff in the foot here, as we mentioned earlier, is the Wales South Africa game, and I think that's probably going to be the deciding factor more than anything, and that could be quite consequential for the rest of Cardiff season going forwards in terms of taking momentum into the rest of the URC. So I'm going to edge Zebra here.
Okay. Ricky?
I'm going to go with Cardiff. I feel like just looking at the table defensively, Zebre defensive bit turnstile. As we mentioned, the international window will have an impact on Cardiff, but I think home advantage as well.
I'd be edging Cardiff slightly, just a wee bit myself. Now, just going to talk about the two final ones, which is Connacht and Sharks, because Connacht haven't got going. They put in some good performances, but they haven't got the results for these performances. Sharks, they are the Real Madrid, the Dallas Cowboys. They are the money spending club of South Africa with all the stars that can't seem to get it right at times. And they're missing their stars this weekend. So do you give any hope to Connacht at home, Henry?
I think so. I mean, what are they? They're 12th and 13th in the league. Like, I think again, it's going to be the same story of that international travel is going to really take out of them. I know obviously it's something they've got used to, but I think coming out of this international window, it's not going to work in their favour. And I do think Connacht is going to be the team that's going to come out on top.
Ricky, what do you think?
I liked your comparison to the Dallas Cowboys. Um, I think Connacht home win, travel, all that pretty,
Fair enough.
yeah, pretty evenly matched.
Fair enough. And the last one is obviously my team, which is Ulster playing Benetton. Ulster have had a fantastic start to the season, which is unexpected. Although they are kind of missing the heartbeat of their team for this match in Stuart McCluskey, having got injured during the international break. How do you think it will go, Henry?
I mean, just to spite you, I am going to back Benetton. I'm joking. I think, yeah, if you look at the table again, like Ulster are fifth, Benetton are 10th. I think it's going to be another like Ulster haven't really been impacted by the Ireland squad that much over the last year or so. I think they're probably in a bit more of a healthy position in terms of squad unity going into the game. So I think Ulster will probably have it.
I know you're discounting Ian Henderson playing against New Zealand, along with Stuart McCluskey and uh, Jacob Stockdale there against Japan. You're not being very fair to Ulster, lad. And Timoney as well. God. Anyway, Ricky, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm not going to discount that they've had big losses to the Ireland squad. Um, I'm going to edge with Ulster. I think just
Fair,
yeah, feels right to me. Home advantage.
fair enough. Well, look, we'll leave it there. And I just want to thank everyone who's listened this far and hope they've enjoyed the content. And look, I'll thank you, Ricky. Thank you very much for joining us, despite your worldly travels this weekend.
Thank you for naming me first as well. That's nice to hear.
You're welcome. And Henry, thank you for coming again this week, and your input is always admired.
As always.
Look, as I say, thank you very much for listening, and we'll talk to you again next week.